Everybody hear me okay? Okay. Yeah. Nice. Sorry, without these chairs missing, I feel kind of lopsided. I'm trying to figure out where to stand. So, I don't know. They say reserved, though, so yeah, somebody. Okay, cool. All right, well, today we're going to be in 2 Samuel 12 and also Psalm 51. So, I think, is anybody familiar with the Discovery Bible Study by any chance? Discovery Bible Study? Has anybody ever heard that term? Okay. All right, cool. So we're going to try it today. We're going to get into this, and it's because I think this is a really good candidate for it. So here's the Discovery Bible Study method. Okay, it's in essence like a template for how you go through something. So what we're going to do is we're going to read a section of this. Okay, and then I'm going to ask everybody to help me retell it. Now the retelling does not have to be perfect. It's just somebody contribute some part of what they thought was important. So, for example, let's say the story is Nathan gives Nicholas some ice cream. Or Nathan bought some ice cream and gave it to Nicholas, right? So then we're retelling it, and I would say, well, Nathan bought some ice cream. And then Nicholas might say, yeah, and then he gave it to Nicholas, right? So we're not like retelling the whole thing, but we're telling it in parts, the parts that we found important or that we remember. The goal of this is not to be perfect, but it's to recount and fix in our minds what we've already read, and then point out important sections, kind of like the highlights of what's gone on, okay? And then once we retell it, then we're going to ask some questions about it and kind of go through together, determine what we can learn from it. And I think this is a really good section for that just because we've got kind of two distinct parts, so we're going to go through it twice. The first part that I want to go through together is verses 1 through the first half of 15, okay? So, recap, what's been going on the past couple weeks in this class? Anybody remember where we've been studying? David, okay. David and Bathsheba, awesome. All right, so David and Bathsheba, David sends Uriah to the front line. Uriah is killed, right? David's excited, which is awful. It's, yeah. Rereading it, it's hard reading that and listening to what David had to say. So now we kind of get into the results of what it was that, the ramifications of what David did. So can I get somebody to read verses 1 through 3 for me? Okay. Yes, 1 through 3. Okay. Can I do 4 through 6? Seven through 9. Yeah. Uh, 10 through 12. Yeah. David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said to David, the Lord also has allowed your sin to pass. You shall not die. Nevertheless, because by this deed you have given opportunity to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme, the son that is born to you shall certainly die. Then Nathan went back to his home. Okay, so just don't look at it for a second. Think about it. What happened in this story? Can we retell it? What was the first thing that happened? Anybody remember? The Lord called Nathan to go talk to David. Okay. What's next? Yeah, Nathan told a story about somebody else. Does anybody remember anything about the story? You were about to say something. I could tell. Anything about the story? Yep, poor farmer and a rich farmer. Well, at least a poor shepherd and a rich shepherd, right? Yeah, I mean, same kind of concept, but yeah. Okay, what happened with the poor and the rich shepherd? The rich shepherd took the poor shepherd's single sheep, right? Yeah. Okay, what happened next? Well, he cooked it and ate it, yeah. So he took it. The rich man took it because he didn't want to get rid of his own herds, right? His own flock. Okay. David gets angry, right? What's next? Sorry? It is of some kind, yes. After that, so David gets angry, and Nathan says, it's you, right? He says, you're the one who's done this. What happens next? No, that's okay. Nathan convicts him because of the Lord's commandments and says what? Your first son will die, okay? And that's where we end up. And then Nathan goes home. Okay, all right. So, trying to figure out the order I want to do this real fast. Okay, let's get into the questions. So, here's two questions. We're going to start out with what does this passage tell us about God? Okay, so I want you to just consider this passage. Think about what does this passage tell us about who God is, right? Or how he regards us, okay? And then I want you to think, what does this passage tell us about people? What does this tell us about us and how we regard God or maybe how we treat each other, okay? So let's start off with what does this passage tell us about God? Does anybody have anything that they think this tells us about God, uniquely informs us? Yeah, go ahead. Okay, right. And you can see that through God's pronouncement on David, right? I'm not going to kill you, but I will kill you. But your son will die, right? Your son will die, right? And if you can, and this is a key part that I forgot to point out. If you can, point to a specific verse or a specific part of the section or the section that we've read that we can look to say, oh yeah, So for example, right? God is forgiving, but also He's not going to let things slide, like it says in, verse 12. Indeed, you did this secretly, but I will do this for all Israel, right? Okay. Anything else? What else does this tell us about God? It's okay. You can you can say something.
God forgives sin, but there's also a price for sin.
Yes.
All man has failed in his life at some point. Whether they carry that failure with them or not, many times determines the man.
So, God's grace is greater than our sin. Is that a good summation, maybe? Yes. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Yeah. Right. Okay. We do have to make an effort toward God to make repentance, right, before God forgives us, is what you're saying, right? This passage taught me something about envy and about covetousness, which I think is really interesting. Looking at verse 8, I also gave you your master's house and put your master's wives into your care and under your protection, and I gave you the house of Israel and of Judah, and if that had been too little, I would have given you much more. So it's interesting to me because, at least in the story that Nathan tells David, right, the rich man had been given lots of fields, but the poor man had been given, or lots of sheep, but the poor man had been given the one sheep, right? And this just tells me something about the way God views envy and covetousness, because it's not just, oh, I just want something I don't have. It's you want something that God has given to other people in spite of what God has already given to you, which I thought was very interesting. That's something that helped crystallize how God thinks about covetousness for me. Is there anything else that this tells us about God? I feel like there's a lot here. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So you also look at God's judgment, and it's also reflected directly to the sins that was committed. So David's not going to die for his son's sin; is going to die because of that sin. And also, the sword's not to depart from his house because he used the sword to get rid of.
Of Uriah, yes.
So there's a direct correlation to the judgment that's being given out to what the sin was.
Yeah, so God is just. The punishment fits the deed, right? Well, yeah. So this is kind of the tough question of the passage, right? So we'll get back to what does this tell us about God in just a second, but I do want to address this because this is the hard part, right? Does the punishment fit the deed? Yeah. Right. Yes. God will find it out, right? So does the punishment fit the deed? Yes. Do I have no's? I got one yes. Do I have two? Can I get two? Two. Yes. God is just. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and put forward. I think it does. I'm kind of with you. I don't know your name. I'm so sorry. I said you, and it's like, yeah, I should say James. Yeah, I'm with James. I think the punishment did fit the deed more so than at first glance. Because what did David do? Right? Well, he killed somebody. I hate to say this, but he killed somebody and he slept with their wife, and that was it, right? Well, what is that to God? Think about this in relation to God, right? We're talking about a son and a daughter of God, right? We're talking about two members of the house of Israel, God's people, who were living, from what we can tell, just fine. They were okay with God from what we know. At least Uriah appeared to be a very good and upright man from the interactions that we have with him with David, right? We don't really know anything about Bathsheba, and so I don't want to make over assumptions, but I think it's safe to say that they were at least right with God, okay? Yes.
Okay, so David knew what found out what happened and was angry. But it's almost exactly the same thing that he had did
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Right.
You have to understand, like, did David know who God was at this period of time? I mean, did David have the Lord in his heart? I mean, in his soul? Apparently not. I mean,
Well, so David knew who God was, right? And David also was considered a man after God's own heart, right? Since the beginning. Yeah, to do something like this. This is awful, right?
I mean, it's like even now, the things that people do, but say, yes, I have the Lord, I believe in God. You know, it's just so easy to say, you know, I believe in the Lord, and then I go lay with somebody else, you know, I commit
Right.
adultery, or I kill somebody, or, you know, it's so easy to say, I have the Lord.
Right. Well, not to diminish what David did, right? But we all, I mean, Lord knows that I am attempting to be as right with God as I can be, and I still sin, right? And sin in the eyes of God is sin, right? Yes. So there is a certain level of, you know, David can be seeking after God and be weak in this moment and have done something wrong. Yep. Yeah. Right. So it wasn't just a matter of your son's going to die and, you know, it's going to be a quiet thing. That's what God was saying, is like, this is going to be public. So you know, again, back to verse 12, you've done this secretly, but I'm going to do this publicly, right? But what did David do? Let's think about this again, just real fast, because I think this is really interesting when we think about this in context. To God, okay, what happened? Let's think about God as the overseer of the shepherds, right, in the story that Nathan told. So both sheep were God's sheep anyways, right? He had given the sheep to the shepherds, right? So David, like I said earlier, it wasn't just, oh, I want somebody else's fill in the blank. It was, I want what God has given to someone else and not what God has given to me, even though God has given David so much already, okay? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, like I was saying earlier, Bathsheba and Uriah, right, were, from what we can tell, at least the passages that were given, upright people, and David brought sin into their house, right? David went and did this thing with Bathsheba and destroyed the household. He's a home wrecker, right? He went in and destroyed the, for lack of a better word, the purity that was there in that marriage, okay? So he did that, and then he killed the Son of God, right? The Son of God, one of man, one of the creation of God, okay? So what is the punishment? Well, you killed Uriah, I'm going to kill your son. We'll see how you like it, okay? And then, because you did that with the sword, because you sent Uriah to die, you didn't even have the dignity to just kill him. You sent him to die as if it were a secret thing. You're never going to have peace, right? That's a big moment, but did David do anything less, right? I think this is an instance where the punishment does fit the crime, right? And maybe not even severe enough. Anybody else's thoughts?
David, as man, he's in prison. He's in prison in his mind, soul, heart. He's suffering. Now, when man crosses that line, sometimes they were in prison, not behind bars, but internally. And David did the right thing to get out of prison. And the way he did that is through the repentance and those type of things. You know, he did adultery, deception, murder.
Yes.
And you recognize it, confessed it, move forward. The price is persevere. Think about your family and what would happen if those things were to happen.
Yeah.
And the person will carry those the rest of their life.
Right.
It's a lifelong commitment.
Repentance was the right response to this. But again, just like James was saying, it doesn't change the punishment, and the punishment fit the crime. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
I was thinking, verse 13.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I have sinned against the Lord. Nathan replied, yes, but the Lord has forgiven you. Oh, it's huge grace at that moment.
Yeah.
He's not going to die, but, like everybody mentioned, the consequences, he's going to have to live with, they're going to follow.
Mm-hmm.
But God right away, yes, forgive you.
Right. Elaine?
Well, that's just what it is, like in the book of Romans, it talks about how in the world, God turns you over to what it is that you desire so easily inherit. It doesn't exclude us Christians.
Right.
I mean, we have a choice every single day, but,
Yeah.
David had a choice too.
And David made this choice, and God visited the same thing on him, right?
He was special. He was set apart to be the king. He was anointed long before, but I think you can get complacent a little bit full of yourself.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Example, you think you got it great with God, and all of a sudden, it's always trying to remember to be grateful for what you have, like you've been saying.
Yes, exactly.
Because we can all fall.
Right, right.
And the consequences, like you said, are pretty serious.
Yes, pretty serious. Exactly. And I, yeah, no, I think that has been said. You're right. Okay, so what else can this tell us about God? Anything else? Anybody got anything burning? Yeah. Yep. Yeah. 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 Yes. Right. Well, and I wanted to say that's something really interesting, right? God goes to Nathan and puts the judgment. He says, let's see what David has to say about this, right? Because David is a man after God's own heart. So David says, yeah, we got to kill that guy. That guy has got to die. And God says, I'm not going to kill you, right? Which is fascinating, the difference in that, because David is a man after God's own heart, and God knows that when I go to David and I tell him this thing, David's gonna react just as I have reacted, as upset and angry as God is at what David has done, right? I think it's interesting. Okay. Yeah.
David sat on the throne, had a great fall. All the men and women could back to the
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Well, and actually, hold on to that thought, because we'll get there in a second. I'm going to write it down. Okay. What does this passage tell us about people? What does this tell us about us? Anything in particular? I think there's a lot to learn, again, from this. That's why I like to do the Discovery Bible Study for this section in particular. There's a lot going around as I talk and give you all time to think. Go ahead.
People learn and admit to their wrongs best when they come to that conclusion rather than being told.
Yeah.
What Mark was saying, the way that God did this, Jesus used this method a lot, where he would tell a story, ask questions, and invite the audience to participate in arriving at the answer so that it's undeniable. And I've watched enough of Dr. Phillips, so when you confront somebody,
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for that. That's a really good insight. I like that. So, people are most receptive when they themselves come to the conclusion that what they did was wrong. Anything else? Yeah. Yeah. Right. 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 Parallelism? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, and there's a lot of that throughout, especially in the next section we'll read. All right, one more thing that this tells us about people. I don't want to limit it, but I've got to because we're running out of time. Yeah. Yeah. So if we stop recognizing what God has given us, it becomes easy to recognize I suppose, want what God has given other people, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. We're going to turn real fast to Psalm 51 and read that really quickly. This is, at least, the footnote in my Bible that says, to the chief musician, Psalm of David, when Nathan the prophet came to him after he had sinned with Bathsheba. Right? So we'll just read through this. I'll go ahead and read it real quick so we can get back to the text and finish up. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your loving kindness. According to the greatness of your compassion, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my wickedness and guilt, and cleanse me from my sin. For I am conscious of my transgressions, and I acknowledge them. My sin is always before me. Against you, you only, have I sinned, and done which is evil in your sight, so that you are justified when you speak, and faultless in your judgment. I was brought forth in wickedness. In sin my mother conceived me. Behold, you desire truth in the innermost being, and in the hidden part you will make me know wisdom. Purify me with hyssop, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Make me hear joy and gladness, and be satisfied. Let the bones which you have broken rejoice. Hide your face from my sins, and blot out all my iniquities. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right and steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence, and do not take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and sustain me with a willing spirit, that I will teach transgressors your ways, and sinners shall be converted and return to you. Rescue me from blood guiltiness, O God, the God of my salvation. Then my tongue will sing joyfully of your righteousness and of your justice. O Lord, open my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise, for you do not delight in sacrifice, or else I would give it. You are not pleased with burnt offerings. My only sacrifice is a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. Such, O God, you will not despise. By your favor do good to Zion. May you rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Then you will delight in the sacrifices of righteousness, in burnt offering and whole burnt offering. Then young bulls will be offered on your altar. Okay. That's a good one. We could discuss that one too. But I think we should get back. 2 Samuel, the second half of 15. Let's read through 23. And the Lord struck the child that Uriah's widow bore to David, and he was very sick. David then appealed to God for the child, and David fasted and went in and lay all night on the ground. The elders of his household stood by him to lift him up from the ground, but he was unwilling, and would not eat food with them. Then it happened on the seventh day that the child died. David's servants were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they said, "While the child was still alive, we spoke to him, and he would not listen to our voices. How then can we tell him the child is dead, since he might harm himself?" But when David saw that his servants were whispering to one another, he realized that the child was dead. So David said to them, "Is the child dead?" And they said, "He is dead." Then David got up from the ground, washed, anointed himself, changed his clothes, and went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. Then he came back to his own house, and when he asked, they set food before him, and he ate. Then his servants said to him, "What is this thing that you have done? While the child was alive, you fasted and wept, but when the child died, you got up and ate food." David said, "While the child was still alive, I fasted and wept, for I thought, 'Who knows, the Lord may be gracious to me, and the child may live.' But now he is dead, why should I continue to fast? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me." Okay. So look up from it. Don't look at it for a second. What happened? Just in that section we read. Can we recount? What was the first thing that happened? The child gets sick. That's the very first thing that happens. What's next? David starts fasting. The elders try to get him up. David doesn't want to. What happens next? The baby dies. Anything else? David gets up. And he worships. Yes, he goes into the house, he goes to worship, right? That's an important part. Okay. Well, and I want to add at the end. I'll just add at the very end. And then David says, while the child was dead, I fasted so that God might have mercy on me. But when the child's dead, there's nothing I can do to bring him back, so I stopped fasting, right? So that's the conclusion of it. He says something about it. So we'll look at it now. He says, "But now he is dead, why should I continue to fast? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me. I will die, but he will not." Yeah, okay. All right, what does this tell us about God? Anything in particular? He follows through on what he says he's going to do, right? Yeah. Yeah, well, and it is tough because God has told us that the wages of our sin are death, right? And God means to follow through with that, but he also has grace, okay? So did God not have grace in this situation? That's kind of the question. And I think the real fast answer is, I think God knows what's best in each moment, right? God knows that at this time it was better for David's child to die to learn this lesson, right? Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, and that's the question. What does that tell us about God? Anything? Yeah. Mm. Yeah, but doesn't God kill a baby for not doing anything? Is that difficult? Does that challenge anybody? So it's better to die. Right. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, these are the important questions, right? Yeah, go ahead. Right. Right. So, yes, God does not see, God does not necessarily see death the same way that we do, right? Because God is an eternal being, and to him, the eternal parts of us are the eternal soul, right? Our soul will go on forever, and so to him, death is just it's the disconnector between us. Yeah, go ahead. Right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Right.
Well, the stigma for this child, it would have been, because of the situation that was under, could have been pretty awful for the child anyway.
Right.
Because back then, that would have been, major deal. So,
Yeah.
may have been a blessing in the long run for, if you look at both situations, whether he lived or he died.
Right. I know what you're trying to say, so I don't want to flip it. So I'm not going to. But there are ways, there are definitely ways to think about this in a very negative light, right? Like this should be challenging because God does kill this child, and whether or not this child, we can make arguments for whether or not it was better that it died or better that it lived, but it hadn't done anything to deserve to die, right? So, yes, I think in some level it is a mercy, right, in the sense that this child was called back to God and didn't have to suffer. But if you think about it for a second, this child was sick for 7 days. So it wasn't like it was stillborn and it never had to deal with any of it. It came in and it dealt with the worst parts of the world immediately for 7 days, right? Yes. So, right, and I think, right. Yes. Yes, and I think, yeah, and I think that is the important part of this story is that this was done not for the child. This was not done because of the child. This hadn't anything to really do with the child. This had everything to do with David, right? And David, as a direct consequence of his actions, caused this suffering. Okay, all right, real fast. I just want to go through these last sections. David comforted his wife Bathsheba and went into her and lay with her, and she gave birth to a son. David named him Solomon. This is the birth of Solomon, so this is important. And the Lord loved the child, which is really interesting. Then he sent word through Nathan the prophet and named him Jedediah. Real fast, because this kind of stumbled me for a second. The words here, it doesn't necessarily mean that the Lord named Solomon Jedediah. His name was not Jedediah. Jedediah, you might have in your Bibles, beloved of the Lord, right after it. It's literally translated beloved of the Lord. It's related to the name David. What this is saying, the word that's translated named him also is sometimes translated called him. And what in this context it most likely means is that God is pronouncing a blessing on the child, in essence, by saying, yes, this child is beloved of the Lord, not name him Jedediah. He's saying, this child is beloved of the Lord, and it's just difficult to translate that into English. Then we go through war again. Joab fights against Rabbah of the Ammonites and captures the royal city. Joab sends messengers to David, and in essence, he's all but taken the city. And then Joab summons David and says, lest I take it and the glory go to me, you come out here, and then we'll take it together, and then you can name the city after yourself. So David then goes out, fights against the Ammonites, and wins. Okay. And then they all return to Jerusalem. That's the very end. Thank you guys for your thoughts. I appreciate it. Thank you for letting me keep you ever so slightly late.